A pedestrian nearly died when a billionaire CEO, Marcus Wellington, blasted through a quiet neighborhood at 68 Minnepetion in a 25 zone. Minutes later, he walks into Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom, smirking, acting as if money can erase almost killing someone. The room turns furious as reckless speed becomes open contempt, and Caprio's patience snaps into steel. When a CEO nearly kills someone, does status still protect him, or will Judge Caprio end the illusion of immunity? Marcus Wellington. Judge Caprio's voice sliced through the courtroom silence. No introduction, no formalities. The CEO of Zenith Financial, the man who turned signatures into empires, glanced up from his phone with visible annoyance. Your Honor, you have a board meeting in 40 minutes. You have someone who nearly died under your car. Caprio's eyes burned into the file. This isn't your corporate lobby, Mr. Wellington. This is where we stop people from becoming casualties on your commute. Marcus actually laughed. A short, dismissive sound that made every spectator's blood freeze. With respect, Judge, I have 15 investors on hold. My time is quite literally worth thousands per minute. Wellington checked his watch, that practiced CEO smile never wavering. Can we settle this quickly? I'm happy to write whatever check makes this disappear. The audacity sucked oxygen from the room. A woman gasped. Someone's pen clattered to the floor. Caprio leaned forward, his voice dropping to something lethal. Describe what happened, every second before you almost killed someone. Wellington sighed like a man asked to explain gravity to children. Caprio stood, each word deliberate, as a verdict. If your wealth excuses nearly ending a life today, what happens when you actually do it tomorrow? The smirk died on Wellington's face. His hand froze halfway to his phone. Because suddenly the courtroom wasn't a minor inconvenience between conference calls. It was a mirror showing him exactly what he'd become. A man who'd calculated that someone else's survival was worth less than his schedule. Wellington straightened his tie composure, returning like muscle memory. Your Honor, Zenith Financial employs 600 people in this city. We paid $4.2 million in local taxes last year. We sponsor youth programs, fund the community center, and personally, I sit on 3 charitable boards. He paused, letting the numbers settle like chips on a poker table. My company keeps this economy breathing. I'm not some reckless kid joyriding through neighborhoods. His attorney nodded, scribbling notes. The city council knows what we contribute. The mayor knows. Every paycheck that family takes home, every small business we've financed. Wellington's voice carried that dangerous edge of someone used to boardrooms bending to his will. Companies like mine don't just support this city, we are this city. Treating me like some common offender sends a message that success gets punished, that the people creating jobs get the same treatment as those breaking them. The implication hung there thick and suffocating. Touch me, and the economic consequences will bleed beyond this courtroom. Finished. Caprio's tone could freeze vodka. Because everything you just said proves exactly why you're more accountable, not less. Wellington blinked. That wasn't the script. Your tax contributions don't purchase immunity, Mr. Wellington. They purchase roads, schools, the very infrastructure you were speeding through when you nearly killed someone. Caprio pulled out the traffic report. 68 miles per hour in a 25 zone. Residential area, 3:15 p.m. School dismissal time. The courtroom stiffened. The law protects your property, your business, your patents. That same law protects the grandmother crossing the street to pick up her grandson. Caprio leaned forward. If wealth grants speed privileges, if every executive can turn neighborhoods into racetracks, then we've abandoned civilization for economic Darwinism. The strong don't just survive, they flatten whoever's in their way. Wellington actually smirked. Your Honor, let's be realistic. We're discussing a pedestrian who stepped into traffic. One person, one incident. He gestured dismissively. Meanwhile, my decisions affect thousands of livelihoods daily. I'm not being callous, I'm being proportional. The economic value of my productivity versus the statistical risk of one careless walker. He shrugged like a man swatting at gnats. The mathematics are fairly obvious. A woman in the front row stood up shaking. The bailiff moved toward her, but she was already walking out, unable to stomach another second. Caprio's knuckles went white, gripping the bench. You just assigned a dollar value to human life and decided yours costs more. You looked at cameras broadcasting this worldwide and calculated that one stranger's existence weighs less than your meeting schedule. Caprio flipped open the police report. The pages rustled in the dead silence. Officer Ramirez pursued you for 6 blocks. He looked up, eyes like steel. 6 consecutive blocks, Mr. Wellington. You had red lights, stop signs, multiple safe pullover zones. You ignored every single one. Wellington examined his cufflinks, that same dismissive gesture that made the construction worker in row 3 clench his fists. I was searching for appropriate parking. Appropriate parking. Caprio let the words hang there like an indictment. The officer activated emergency lights at Maple and 3rd. You blew through 4 intersections, past Lincoln Elementary at 3:15 p.m., exactly when parents line up for pickup, through 2 residential neighborhoods where children play. You finally stopped at the Starbucks lot, adjacent to your corporate headquarters. He set the file down with surgical precision. You selected your personal convenience over a lawful police order. I prioritized safety, Your Honor. That initial street was too narrow. You prioritized your coffee shop. Caprio's voice could cut diamonds. You decided compliance would happen on your schedule at your preferred location. The law became negotiable, a suggestion you'd consider after your latte. Caprio's hand swept toward the gallery. Everyone here waited. The electrician who lost half a day's wages to appear. The nursing student who rescheduled clinical rotations. The retired teacher on a fixed income who took the bus here. Each face represented obedience despite cost. They stood when instructed, spoke when addressed, followed every protocol because equal justice demands it. Wellington had entered like he owned the venue. Phone out, checking emails. Coat draped over his forearm like he was at a networking event. He'd nodded at his attorney with the casual presumption of someone expecting this resolved before his next conference call. Nobody else walked in that way. Nobody else dared. The single mother in row 5 had arrived 30 minutes early, hands folded, terrified of saying the wrong thing. The college kid had stammered his apologies, nearly in tears over a parking meter violation. Wellington had sighed, actually sighed when asked to approach the bench. Mr. Wellington, does everyone in this room have the right to choose when and where they comply with police orders? Can the electrician decide red lights don't apply during rush hour? Can the nursing student pick which stop signs matter based on her exam schedule? The silence was Wellington's answer. He knew. He just didn't care. Caprio stood, his voice filling every molecule of air. This stopped being about a traffic ticket the moment you decided your status granted exemption. The camera operators leaned in. Every phone was recording. We're now determining whether this country maintains a justice system where laws bind everyone equally, or whether we've constructed a 2-tier society where wealth purchases different rules. The courtroom held its breath. Because if I dismiss this, if I accept that your tax contributions or your employee count or your board meetings justify endangering pedestrians and ignoring police, then I'm ruling that justice has a purchase price, that some lives matter more than others, that the law protects the powerful and merely governs the rest. He paused, each word deliberate. This courtroom will decide right now whether America still believes all citizens are created equal under law, or whether we finally admitted what your arrogance suggests, that some people are more equal than others, and the difference is calculated in your bank balance. Let's watch what actually happened. Caprio's voice was ice. He nodded to the bailiff. The courtroom lights dimmed slightly as the screen flickered to life. The dash cam footage began with Officer Ramirez's patrol car cruising Hope Street at precisely 3:14 p.m. Normal traffic, families visible on sidewalks. Then, like a missile breaking the sound barrier, a silver Bentley exploded into frame. The speedometer overlay read 68 miles per hour in a 25 zone. The Bentley wasn't just speeding, it was devouring pavement, swallowing distance that should have provided safety margins, reaction time, the space between life and death. A grandmother appeared at the crosswalk, her cane already extended into the street. She was halfway across when Wellington's car screamed past. The wind displacement from the Bentley was visible on camera. Her coat whipped violently. She stumbled backward, grabbing the light post to keep from falling. Her mouth formed a perfect O of terror. Someone in the gallery gasped. The Bentley continued. Ahead, 3 children on bicycles rode single file near the curb, exactly as they'd been taught in school safety programs. Helmets on, following rules. One boy, maybe 8 years old, glanced over his shoulder at the approaching engine roar. His eyes went wide. He swerved toward the grass, his bike toppling sideways as he chose a scraped knee over being obliterated. "Jesus Christ," someone whispered. Officer Ramirez activated lights and sirens. The emergency equipment was deafening even through the video speakers. Red and blue strobed across residential homes, warning everyone that danger was present, that law enforcement required immediate compliance. Wellington didn't slow down, not even slightly. His brake lights never illuminated. The pursuit continued for 6 blocks. The camera captured every moment. Wellington ran a red light at Pine Street where a minivan had to slam brakes, its tires smoking. He blew through a stop sign at Oak Avenue where a jogger lunged backward onto someone's lawn. At every intersection, the potential for catastrophic collision increased exponentially. Finally, the Bentley decelerated, turning smoothly into a Starbucks parking lot. Wellington selected a spot near the entrance, parking with the casual precision of someone arriving for a business meeting. Officer Ramirez approached, hand near his weapon, uncertain if this was a pursuit ending or something more dangerous. Wellington's window remained up. Through the glass, he was clearly visible on his phone, animated gesturing with his free hand, conducting business while a police officer stood waiting. 30 seconds passed. Ramirez knocked on the window. Wellington held up one finger. "Wait." Another 40 seconds. The officer knocked again, harder. Wellington finally lowered the window, 3 inches, phone still pressed to his ear. His lips moved, saying something inaudible on the recording, but his expression communicated everything. Annoyance. Superiority. The body language of someone interrupted during something important by something trivial. The audio picked up his voice. "Do you know what this call is worth? Probably more than your yearly salary." Ramirez maintained professional composure. "Sir, I need your license and registration." Wellington sighed dramatically, fished out his wallet with his non-phone hand and flicked the license toward the officer. Not handed. Flicked. The way you'd toss a poker chip to a dealer. The license hit the officer's chest and fell to the pavement. Caprio froze the frame. The image on screen showed Wellington's license on the ground, Ramirez bending to retrieve it, and Wellington's face visible through the window, smirking. "This," Caprio said, his voice trembling with controlled fury, "is your version of nobody was in danger." Wellington shifted in his stance, recovering his composure. "Your Honor, that video proves my point. I'm an excellent driver. I had complete control of my vehicle. Notice I didn't hit anyone. Not the woman, not the children, not a single person. Because I'm skilled enough to navigate those situations." The audacity sucked oxygen from the room. Caprio leaned forward, knuckles white against the bench. "You think control is a feeling, Mr. Wellington. You think because you're confident behind the wheel physics doesn't apply. I think my capabilities exceed those of average drivers. Control isn't your subjective assessment of your abilities." Caprio's voice rose. "Control is measurable. At 68 miles per hour, your stopping distance is 240 feet. That's from the moment you perceive danger to complete stop. At 25 miles per hour, it's 75 feet. He jabbed his finger toward the frozen video. "That grandmother was 30 feet from your trajectory. Those children were less than 20. You had zero margin for error, a blown tire, a pothole, a momentary distraction, and you're not having this conversation because you'd be in a criminal courtroom facing vehicular manslaughter." Wellington's jaw tightened. "But those things didn't happen. Because of luck." Caprio slammed his hand on the bench. The crack echoed like a gunshot. "You're standing here arguing that attempted outcomes don't matter, only actual ones. By your logic, drunk drivers who make it home safely committed no offense. A person firing a gun into a crowd who happens to miss everyone is innocent. That's a false equivalence. Is it you operated a 3-ton vehicle at triple the legal limit in a zone specifically designed to protect the most vulnerable citizens?" 3:15 p.m. Mr. Wellington. "School dismissal. That's not coincidence. Those speed limits exist because children that age have underdeveloped peripheral vision. They dart into streets chasing balls, chasing friends. At 25 miles per hour, a driver has time to stop. At your speed, you have time to plan a funeral." Marcus's face flushed. "I saw the children. I adjusted accordingly." "You saw them and chose to maintain speed." Caprio's voice dropped to something lethal. "Every single driver in America sees pedestrians and adjusts by slowing down. You saw them and calculated you could thread the needle. You gambled with their lives and congratulated yourself when nobody died. The gallery was transfixed. Several people were crying. Let me give you some actual data since you're a numbers man, Caprio continued. In the United States, pedestrian fatalities in residential areas have increased 43% in the last decade. No-why vehicles getting heavier speeds increasing, and entitled drivers who believe their schedules matter more than someone's child walking home from school. Your Bentley weighs 5,400 pounds. At your speed, hitting a pedestrian isn't an accident. It's obliteration. There's no injury. There's death, Mr. Wellington. Instant, absolute death. Wellington's mouth opened, then closed. And that 8-year-old boy who crashed his bike to avoid you? His name is Daniel Martinez. His mother filed a police report describing how her son won't ride his bicycle anymore. He has nightmares about cars. A third grader now has PTSD because you couldn't be 15 minutes late to a meeting. Wellington's composure finally cracked. His face contorted with rage, the mask of civility disintegrating. You know what, Your Honor? The honorific dripped with sarcasm. This is exactly what I expected from someone who's never built anything, never created jobs, never made decisions that actually matter. You sit in your robe in your little government building, passing judgment on people who actually contribute to society. The courtroom froze. Even the stenographer stopped typing. People like you, Wellington continued, his voice rising, you resent success. You hide behind legal technicalities because it's the only power you'll ever have. You're a bureaucrat playing dress-up, pretending your opinions matter to people who operate in the real world. Caprio stood slowly. His face had gone pale, then flushed crimson. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, and somehow that made it more terrifying. Mr. Wellington, you just made a catastrophic mistake, Wellington sneered. What, you'll hold me in contempt? Fine. Add it to the bill. My attorney will have this overturned before you finish your afternoon coffee break. I'm not finished reviewing the evidence. Caprio said each word deliberate as a death sentence. And now I'm not finished with you. Caprio's eyes locked onto Wellington like a prosecutor who just heard a confession. The question came quietly, but it landed like a bomb in the silent courtroom. Mr. Wellington, I need you to answer something directly. Do you believe traffic laws apply to you? The cameras zoomed tighter. Every phone in the gallery angled for the perfect shot. The moment crystallized, the kind of instant that defines careers, ruins reputations, becomes the clip played on every news channel for the next 72 hours. Wellington's attorney touched his arm, a gentle warning. Don't answer. Invoke your right to remain silent. Request a recess. Wellington shook him off. Your Honor, I believe laws should be applied with discretion based on the individual circumstances and the person involved. His voice carried that boardroom authority, the tone he used when explaining obvious truths to subordinates who couldn't grasp complex concepts. That's not what I asked. Caprio's patience had become something sharp, dangerous. I asked if you think traffic laws apply to you. Yes or no? Wellington smiled, that same condescending expression he'd worn since entering the courtroom. I think laws are tools for maintaining social order among people who lack the judgment to regulate their own behavior. For those of us who've demonstrated superior decision-making in high-stakes environments, those laws should be guidelines, not absolutes. A woman in the third row covered her mouth. The construction worker who'd been clenching his fists earlier stood up, the bailiff immediately moving toward him. The man sat back down, but his face was purple with rage. So your answer is no. Caprio said it as a statement, not a question. You don't believe you're bound by the same laws that govern everyone else in this city. I believe I should be trusted to exercise mature judgment about when strict compliance is necessary versus when flexibility is appropriate. Wellington adjusted his tie, completely oblivious to the fact that he was cremating whatever remained of his public image. I'm not some teenager joyriding. I'm a CEO responsible for hundreds of millions in assets. My daily decisions affect thousands of people's livelihoods. Treating me like some common traffic offender ignores that context. Context! Caprio repeated the word like it was poisonous. The context is you nearly killed people because you were late to a meeting. The context is you treated a police officer like a valet. The context is you're standing in a courtroom under oath arguing that your bank account should purchase you exemption from laws designed to keep children alive. Wellington's face hardened. I'm arguing that one-size-fits-all enforcement is simplistic and ignores the reality that different people have different capabilities and different value to society. The courtroom erupted, voices overlapping, shouting the bailiff, calling for order. Through the chaos, you could hear distinct words. Unbelievable, entitled piece of, who does he think? Caprio's gavel cracked down 3 times, each strike louder than the last. Order, I will have order. The room settled into a furious silence, the kind that precedes explosions. Mr. Wellington, I want to be absolutely certain I understand you correctly. Caprio's voice was surgical. You're testifying that your wealth and position mean traffic laws should not apply to you with the same force they apply to, say, the nursing student sitting behind you who took public transportation here today because she can't afford a car. I'm saying enforcement should be proportional and intelligent. You're saying you're special. I'm saying I'm different. Wellington's voice rose. And pretending everyone is exactly the same is a fantasy that ignores reality. I create jobs, I pay taxes, I contribute. That single mother you mentioned, her paycheck comes from people like me. Maybe she should be grateful I was trying to get to a meeting that ensures she stays employed, instead of nitpicking about a few miles over some arbitrary limit. The construction worker stood again. This time he was walking toward the exit, shaking his head, unable to stomach another word. The bailiff let him go. Wellington watched him leave, then turned back to Caprio with a smirk. See people who can't handle reality when it's spoken plainly. Are you finished, Mr. Wellington? Caprio's voice could freeze nitrogen. Am I finished? Wellington laughed, the sound bouncing off the walls like shrapnel. I'm finished wasting my time in this kangaroo court listening to a government employee lecture me about responsibility. I run a billion-dollar company. You stamp papers and feel important. We are not the same. Caprio stood slowly, his height suddenly imposing. Mr. Wellington, I'm going to give you one opportunity to apologize for that statement and conduct yourself with the dignity this court deserves. Dignity? Wellington's eyes were wild now, all pretense of composure abandoned. You want to talk about dignity? You drag me down here for a traffic ticket like I'm some punk kid. You've wasted 2 hours of my day that cost more than you make in a month, and now you're threatening me. I'm giving you a chance to step back from a mistake you're about to make. Wellington's attorney was pulling at his sleeve, whispering urgently. Wellington yanked his arm away so violently his attorney stumbled. You know what? Wellington's voice went quiet, which somehow made it more menacing. I'm done pretending to respect this circus. What happened next occurred in slow motion for everyone watching, yet felt instantaneous. Marcus Wellington looked directly at Judge Frank Caprio. He raised his right hand, extending his middle finger, and held it there. 3 seconds. 4. 5. The courtroom didn't explode into noise. It collapsed into shocked silence, the kind of airless vacuum that follows a detonation before the screaming begins. Wellington's smirk widened. He rotated his hands slightly, making certain every camera angle captured the gesture, making certain there could be no ambiguity, no claim of accidental positioning. This was deliberate. This was contempt distilled to its purest form. There's your respect, your honor. He spat the title like a curse. The bailiff's hand went to his weapon. 2 court officers moved forward from opposite corners. The stenographer's fingers hovered frozen above her keys, her professional detachment shattered. In the hallway outside, the news crews had been monitoring the proceedings through the crack in the door. A reporter whispered into her microphone, "We are witnessing courthouse history. A defendant just gave the judge the middle finger on live proceedings. I have never in 15 years covering courts seen anything like this." Back inside, Caprio remained motionless, his face carved from stone. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper, yet it carried to every corner of the room. Mr. Wellington, you just transformed your traffic violation into something far more serious. You just provided me with video evidence of contempt of court, witnessed by dozens of people and recorded by multiple cameras. You just eliminated every ounce of discretion I might have exercised in your favor. Wellington lowered his hand, but not his defiance. Do your worst. My attorneys will have this overturned before dinner. Caprio sat back down, his movements deliberate, controlled. He opened the legal code book on his bench, finding a marked page as if he'd known this moment was coming. Mr. Wellington, you seem to believe this courtroom operates like your boardroom, where money and position grant you immunity from consequences. Allow me to clarify your situation. He read from the statute, his voice level, educational almost. Rhode Island General Law, 12 to 911, criminal contempt of court. Any person who willfully disrupts court proceedings, demonstrates flagrant disrespect for judicial authority, or engages in conduct designed to undermine the administration of justice may be held in criminal contempt, punishable by up to 6 months imprisonment and fines up to $1,000. Wellington's smirk faltered. This isn't a traffic violation anymore, Mr. Wellington. What you just did, that gesture, that statement, transforms this into a criminal matter. And unlike traffic court, criminal contempt carries consequences your money cannot eliminate. Your attitude, your complete lack of remorse, your demonstrated belief that you are above the law, all constitute evidence of your likelihood to reoffend, to continue endangering public safety, to remain a threat to this community. Caprio closed the book with a sound like a coffin lid. Your reckoning has arrived, Mr. Wellington, and you delivered it to yourself. Wellington recovered faster than anyone expected. His attorney was still pale, hand trembling, as he scribbled notes, but Marcus straightened his posture, that corporate armor clicking back into place. Your Honor, let's be practical. His voice had shifted to negotiation mode, the tone he used closing deals. What's the fine for these violations? I'll pay it right now. Double if that helps expedite this. I have a 4 o'clock with investors flying in from Singapore. Let's resolve this so we can all move on with our days. He reached for his wallet, actually pulled out a black American Express card, the kind with no spending limit, held it up like a hall pass that would excuse him from detention. The audacity was breathtaking. Caprio stared at the credit card, then at Wellington, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched 10 seconds. 15. The tension became physical, pressing against eardrums. Put that away. Caprio's voice was quiet, dangerously quiet. I'm trying to settle this efficiently. You're trying to purchase your way out of consequences. Caprio leaned forward. Mr. Wellington, you make $4.5 million annually. A traffic fine, even at maximum penalty, represents what to you? The cost of a business lunch, a tank of gas for your Bentley. Wellington shrugged, confirming everything. This is precisely the problem. Caprio's voice rose. For the nursing student behind you, a $200 fine means choosing between textbooks and groceries. It changes behavior because it has to. For you, a $2,000 fine is a rounding error on your weekly expenses. You'll hand that card to your assistant, she'll process the payment, and by tomorrow you'll have forgotten this ever happened. Zero deterrent effect, zero behavioral modification, just a momentary inconvenience. So you admit fines are ineffective for successful people. I'm saying fines alone don't work when wealth eliminates their sting. Caprio pulled out a different file, this one thicker. There's a term for what you're proposing, Mr. Wellington. Justice for sale. The idea that if your rich enough laws become suggestions, you can buy your way past. And when citizens believe the legal system operates that way, when they watch wealthy offenders walk away consequence-free, while working families get crushed by penalties they can't afford, they stop believing in the system entirely. I didn't create the system, Your Honor. No, but you're trying to exploit it, and I won't allow that. Caprio opened the file, his movements deliberate. Mr. Wellington, I'm going to explain each component of your sentence, so there is no ambiguity about why these penalties exist and how they're calculated. This isn't arbitrary. This isn't personal. This is proportional accountability. His gavel remained untouched, but everyone knew it was coming. Charge 1, reckless driving at 68 miles per hour in a 25 mile per hour residential zone. Maximum fine under Rhode Island law is $2,500. He paused. Given the extreme nature of your speed, the school zone timing, and the multiple near collisions captured on video, I'm imposing the maximum, $2,500. Wellington didn't flinch. Pocket change. Charge 2, failure to comply with a lawful police order. You continued driving for 6 blocks after emergency lights and sirens were activated. You prioritized your convenience over officer safety and public safety. Fine $1,000. Still no reaction. His attorney was writing frantically, already calculating appeal strategies. Charge 3, disorderly conduct during the traffic stop. You threw your license at Officer Ramirez. You refused to end a phone call when lawfully detained. You made disparaging comments about the officer's salary. Fine $1,000. Wellington examined his cufflinks. Bored. Charge 4, contempt of court. Caprio's voice hardened. You insulted this court's authority. You argued that laws should not apply to you. And you made an obscene gesture directly at this bench on camera, witnessed by dozens of people broadcast live. He let that sink in. Rhode Island law allows up to 6 months imprisonment for criminal contempt. I'm imposing the maximum monetary fine of $1,000. Now Wellington looked up. Wait, imprisonment. You said monetary fine. I said I'm imposing the maximum fine. I haven't finished with the sentence. Caprio's eyes were steel. Your total financial penalty is $5,500 payable immediately. Wellington actually smiled. That's it. I'm not finished, Mr. Wellington. Those fines address the technical violations. Now we address the real problem, which is you. The smile died. The evidence demonstrates you're a continuing threat to public safety. Your attitude proves you learned nothing. You showed zero remorse. You believe your wealth grants immunity. Those facts inform the rest of your sentence, which money cannot erase. Wellington's attorney stood. Your Honor, I'd like to request a brief recess to consult with my client. Request denied. Your client has been consulting himself throughout this proceeding, and it's brought him here. Sit down. The attorney sat. Mr. Wellington, surrender your driver's license to the bailiff. Now. Wellington froze. Voici what? Your driving privileges in the state of Rhode Island are suspended for 6 months, effective immediately. The color drained from Marcus's face. You can't do that. I need to drive for work. I have meetings across the state, across the country. I have site visits, investor presentations, emergency situations that require immediate transportation. You should have considered that before driving 68 in a 25. Caprio's voice was granite. You endangered lives because you were late to a meeting. You told this court your schedule justifies risking pedestrian safety. You've demonstrated you cannot be trusted with the privilege of operating a vehicle. This is insane. I'll hire drivers. This is just an inconvenience. Then let me make it more than an inconvenience. Caprio wasn't finished. You will complete 50 hours of community service. Specifically, you'll work with the Safe Streets Youth Program, teaching teenagers about reckless driving consequences. You'll share your story. You'll explain how arrogance and entitlement nearly killed a grandmother and traumatized an 8-year-old boy. You'll be the cautionary tale. Marcus's jaw worked speechless. Additionally, you're required to complete an 8-week defensive driving course. Every Saturday morning. Miss one session, your suspension extends to 12 months. This is excessive. This is punitive beyond reason. This is proportional to your offense and your attitude. Caprio picked up a document, his voice dropping. And Mr. Wellington, here's what's going to hurt more than anything else. This courtroom footage, including your middle finger gesture, your contempt for Officer Ramirez, and your stated belief that laws don't apply to you, will be forwarded to the Rhode Island Bar Association, the State Business Licensing Board, and the Providence Public Safety Department as evidence of character relevant to your professional standing. Wellington's face went white. You're trying to destroy my career. I'm ensuring relevant authorities know who you are. What they do with that information is their decision. The footage hit Twitter at 4:47 p.m. By 5:30, it had 40,000 retweets. By 7:00 p.m., every major news network was running the clip on loop. By midnight, it had 17 million views. The freeze frame became iconic. Marcus Wellington expensive suit designer watch, visible middle finger extended toward Judge Caprio, that smirk of absolute contempt frozen for eternity. The image crystallized everything people felt about wealth inequality, entitled Executives: The Erosion of Accountability. CNN ran it with the Chiron CEO's courtroom meltdown when privilege meets reality. Fox News countered with Judges Overreach, Traffic Stop Becomes National Debate. MSNBC went with The Finger That Launched 1,000 Think Pieces. Social media erupted into tribal warfare. This judge is out of control. Wellington was speeding fine but destroying a man's career over a traffic ticket. This is government tyranny dressed up as justice. Free Wellington. The counter-response came fast and furious. Are you serious? He nearly killed people, disrespected a cop, flipped off a judge on camera, and you're defending him. This is exactly why rich people think laws don't apply to them. Your Caprio did right. The hashtags trended simultaneously. Wellington privilege versus justice for all. The comment sections became bloodbaths. A YouTuber with 3 million subscribers did a breakdown video titled CEO Destroys Career in 60 Seconds, a Psychology Analysis. Within 18 hours, it had 9 million views. The creator freeze-framed Wellington's expressions, charting his journey from condescension to panic, narrating it like a nature documentary about predators encountering larger predators. Notice the micro-expression at timestamp 1432. That's the moment Wellington realizes money won't save him. Watch the pupils dilate, the jaw clench, the fundamental recalibration happening in real time as his worldview collapses. Late-night talk shows piled on. Stephen Colbert did a segment where he photoshopped Wellington's middle finger onto Mount Rushmore. Finally, a monument to American exceptionalism that captures our current moment. The audience roared. Trevor Noah took a different angle, using the clip to discuss wealth disparity. This man makes $4.5 million a year and thought a traffic fine was negotiable. Meanwhile, there are people in this country who've had their lives destroyed over $20 parking tickets they couldn't afford. Tell me again how justice is blind. The View dedicated an entire episode to it. The panel split predictably. He was disrespectful and deserved consequences. The punishment doesn't fit the crime. This is about class warfare. This is about basic human decency. But the most damaging coverage came from business networks. Bloomberg ran a segment analyzing Apex Capital's stock price. The graph showed a cliff dive. Opening bell the morning after the video dropped, shares fell 11% in the first hour of trading. By market close, the company had lost $1.3 billion in valuation. CNBC brought on a crisis management expert who said 5 words that made executives across America shudder. This is a fiduciary issue now. The Apex Capital corporate communications team went into full catastrophe mode. Their inbox exploded. Investors demanding explanations. Partners requesting emergency calls. Clients threatening to pull contracts. At 6:00 a.m., the morning after the verdict, Sarah Chen, Apex's chief marketing officer, sat in an emergency strategy meeting with 8 other executives. None of them had slept. The conference room's wall screen displayed a real-time social media monitoring dashboard, and every refresh brought fresh horror. We've lost the Morrison account, someone announced. They released a statement saying they can't be associated with leadership that demonstrates such flagrant disregard for public safety and legal authority. Sentinel Investments just pulled out of the Series C round. $20 million gone. The Providence Teachers Pension Fund is divesting all Apex holdings. They're citing ethical concerns. Sarah pulled up the internal employee communication system. The Slack channels were chaos. Engineering, sales, HR, every department drowning in anxiety. Is it true we're getting boycotted? My brother saw protesters outside the office this morning. Are we going to lose our jobs because Marcus couldn't keep his cool for 30 minutes? I have a mortgage. I have kids. This isn't fair. The company's main Twitter account had been flooded with demands for Wellington's resignation. The top comment with 43,000 likes. How can we trust a company led by someone who thinks laws are optional? What other rules is Apex breaking when nobody's watching? Aracho Apex Capital, your CEO just told the world he's above accountability. What are you going to do about it? Major business publications started running profiles on Apex, suddenly scrutinizing everything. Forbes published The Wellington Empire Built on Innovation or Cutting Corners. The piece dug into every regulatory complaint, every settled lawsuit, every whispered rumor that had been ignored when the stock was climbing. The Wall Street Journal was more brutal. Their headline, When Corporate Culture Collides with Reality, the Apex Leadership Crisis. The article quoted anonymous current and former employees describing a workplace where Wellington's attitude toward rules wasn't an aberration, but a feature. He told us regulations were for companies afraid to innovate. Now we understand what that really meant. LinkedIn became a battlefield. Apex employees started updating their profiles, quietly removing mention of their current employer, or adding desperate disclaimers, Views my own, not representative of my employer. Some started job hunting openly, their profiles suddenly active after years of dormancy. Recruiters from competing firms began circling, sending messages to top Apex talent. Given recent events, wanted to see if you might be open to exploring opportunities with leadership you can be proud of. The Providence Business Ethics Council released a statement, measured, careful, devastating. While we cannot comment on pending legal matters, we believe corporate leaders bear responsibility not just to shareholders, but to the communities they operate within. Actions that demonstrate contempt for public safety and legal authority raise serious questions about judgment and values. The Rhode Island Chamber of Commerce went further, announcing they were suspending Apex Capital's membership pending an ethics review. And through it all, Marcus Wellington remained silent. His attorney had gagged him, terrified of what he might say. But silence in crisis is its own statement, and the void filled with speculation, accusation, and rage. The comment sections told the real story. Not the talking heads or the corporate statements, but the raw testimonials from people who'd lived this injustice in smaller, quieter ways. I got pulled over for going 38 in a 35. I'm a black man driving a 10-year-old Honda. The cop had me out of the car, hands on the hood, treating me like a criminal. Meanwhile, this CEO goes 68 in a 25, throws his license at a cop, and thinks he can buy his way out. Tell me the system isn't rigged. My daughter got a reckless driving ticket 3 years ago. She's still paying it off at $50 a month because the fine was $1,200 and she makes minimum wage. She cried in court, apologized to the judge, showed genuine remorse. Still got crushed. This guy flips off the judge and people are defending him. I'm a crossing guard. Every single day I watch luxury cars blow through school zones at double the speed limit. I've reported license plates dozens of times. Nothing ever happens. Finally, one of these entitled pricks got held accountable, and half the country is crying about it being too harsh. Where's that energy for the rest of us? A video went viral from a woman named Maria Torres. She spoke directly to camera, tears streaming. 3 years ago, a speeding driver killed my son. He was 7 years old, crossing the street to our house after school. The driver was going 60 in a residential zone, just like Wellington. Know what happened? Plea deal. Community service. No jail time. He's still driving. My son is still dead. So don't tell me this judge went too hard. He finally did what judges are supposed to do, protect people over privilege. The video got 12 million views in 24 hours. Judge Caprio became an unexpected folk hero. Memes flooded social media, showing him as a superhero, as Lady Justice, as the only adult in a room full of spoiled children. Fan art depicted him standing firm against a tsunami of money, unmoved. A grassroots movement emerged overnight. Thank you, Judge Caprio trended for 3 days straight. A GoFundMe appeared, aiming to raise money for a scholarship in Caprio's name for law students focused on equal justice. It hit its $100,000 goal in 6 hours. Letters poured into his courthouse. Thousands of them. Handwritten thank yous from people who'd felt invisible, unheard, crushed by a system that seemed to favor whoever could afford the best lawyers. You reminded us that courtrooms can still be places where truth matters more than money. Thank you for showing my children that rules apply to everyone. You restored my faith that someone in power still cares about ordinary people. But perhaps the most powerful testimony came from Daniel Martinez's mother. She appeared on local news, her son standing beside her, still nervous around traffic. Judge Caprio did what our system is supposed to do. He protected my child. He held someone accountable for traumatizing my little boy. Mr. Wellington's supporters say the punishment was too harsh. She looked directly into the camera. Come talk to Daniel about his nightmares. Then tell me if 6 months without a license is too much for nearly killing him. The interview was shared 4 million times. Caprio's courtroom became a symbol, not just of one judge doing his job, but of the possibility that justice could still function, that wealth didn't automatically purchase immunity, that somewhere in America accountability still existed. The question wasn't whether Wellington got what he deserved anymore. The question was why this felt so rare, so shocking, so revolutionary. The answer was the part nobody wanted to say out loud. 3 hours after the courtroom adjourned, Janet Morrison's phone exploded with emergency calls. By 8:00 p.m., she'd convened an emergency board meeting at Apex Capital headquarters. 7 board members sat around the executive conference table, faces illuminated by laptop screens showing the courtroom footage on endless replay across every news channel. "We need to address this now." Janet's voice cut through the tension. "That video has been viewed 40 million times. Our stock dropped 11% before trading closed. Institutional investors are calling for statements." Thomas Chen, the CFO, pulled up their main corporate account. "We're being tagged thousands of times per minute. Clients asking if we condone this behavior. Employees asking if they'll have jobs tomorrow." Janet's phone buzzed again. She glanced down, jaw tightening. "Wellington, he's been calling nonstop." "Don't answer," David Park warned immediately. The phone kept ringing. Janet silenced it. 10 seconds later, a text appeared. She read it aloud, disbelief coating each word. "Handle the media. Issue a statement supporting me. The judge overreached. Make this go away tonight. Not a request." Rebecca Walsh, head of investor relations, actually laughed a brittle sound. "He just gave a judge the middle finger on camera, and he thinks we can make it disappear." "He's giving us orders," Thomas said slowly, "while the company is burning." "Morrison Industrial already pulled their contract," Rebecca added, voice shaking. "8 million gone. Sentinel Health sent notice they're reviewing the relationship. That's our third biggest client." Another board member spoke up. "Providence Teachers Pension Fund divested completely. They issued a statement about ethical leadership being a fiduciary requirement." Janet's phone rang again. "Wellington." She declined it. He called the office line, then her assistant's number, cycling through every contact point, unable to comprehend that doors were closing. "He doesn't understand," David said quietly. "He thinks this is manageable. He actually believes his position protects him." "Not from this," Janet replied. "You can't fix what the whole country watched him do." Janet pulled up the courtroom video on the conference room screen. "We need to watch the entire thing, from the moment he walked in until Judge Caprio dismissed him." They watched Marcus enter the courtroom like he owned it, watched him dismiss the judge's greeting, watched him explain why he hadn't stopped for police. "I was looking for somewhere convenient." The casual entitlement in those 5 words made several board members wince. They watched him tell Judge Caprio, "Do you know who I am?" Watched the smirk when he listed his contributions, his employees, his importance. "I think my position is very relevant." David Park, former federal prosecutor, leaned forward. "Watch his face when Caprio says his CEO title doesn't matter in court. He genuinely can't process it." The video continued. Marcus explaining laws should be flexible based on who's being charged. Marcus telling the judge he was being too sensitive. Marcus laughing when asked if anyone was endangered. Almost doesn't count. Then the dash cam footage played. The Bentley screaming through residential streets, the grandmother stumbling backward, the child on the bicycle swerving into grass to avoid being killed. Marcus on his phone making the officer wait, flicking his license like a poker chip. "Notice something," Thomas said, pausing the video. "At no point does he show remorse, not once. Even when confronted with video of nearly killing people, he defends it. 'I had control.' Like that justifies everything." Rebecca pulled up internal files. "I checked our compliance records after this broke. Wellington has overruled our legal department 17 times in 3 years. Always the same justification: regulations, slow down innovation rules, are for companies afraid to compete. He told our attorneys that," Janet's voice went cold. "It's documented, and look at this." Rebecca displayed another file. 6 HR settlements in 4 years, all sealed with NDAs. "I can't see details, but the pattern is clear." David stood pacing. "That courtroom video isn't an anomaly. It's who he is. A man who believes rules don't apply to him, that his success puts him above laws meant for ordinary people. And he's been running this company with that exact mentality. If his attitude toward traffic laws matches his attitude toward securities regulations, banking compliance, any of the frameworks we operate under." Thomas didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Janet watched the video reach its climax. Marcus faced with accountability, giving Judge Caprio the middle finger, holding it there, making sure it was unmistakable. That smirk of pure contempt. "This isn't a PR crisis," she said quietly. "This is a character revelation, and the character revealed is fundamentally incompatible with leading a publicly traded company in a regulated industry." At 1:47 a.m., Janet called for the vote. All in favor of immediately removing Marcus Wellington as CEO with 7 hands rose. The video participants from London and Tokyo verbally confirmed. Unanimous. All in favor of appointing Thomas Chen as interim CEO effective immediately. Unanimous. All in favor of implementing mandatory executive ethics training requiring all senior leadership to complete compliance certification. Unanimous. 3 votes. 3 minutes. A career ended. Janet drafted the statement herself. Effective immediately, Marcus Wellington has been removed as CEO of Apex Capital. The board determined that conduct displayed in Providence Municipal Court is incompatible with our values and fiduciary responsibilities. Thomas Chen assumes interim leadership. We are implementing the Wellington Accountability Program mandatory ethics training for all executives to ensure this failure becomes a lesson. The irony of naming ethics training after the man who necessitated it was deliberate. At 2:33 a.m., Janet called Wellington directly. "You're firing me." Rage vibrated through the phone. "I built this company. Every one of you exists because of what I created." "You gave a judge the middle finger on live television," Janet said evenly. "You told the country laws don't apply to you. The board voted unanimously. You're done. I'll sue. I'll destroy you. I'll start a competitor and crush Apex. Your non-compete is binding. Your severance requires cooperation. And Marcus," she paused, "after what America watched you do today, I don't think anyone's investing in your judgment ever again." She hung up. In the conference room, someone poured scotch, a quiet toast to doing what was necessary, even when it cost everything. Outside, dawn broke over Providence, the city waking to news that would prove one truth: even empires fall when built on contempt. 2 days after the verdict, Assistant District Attorney Michael Torres sat in his office reviewing the courtroom footage for the 7th time. What had started as routine traffic court had evolved into something that demanded his attention. He paused the video at the moment Marcus Wellington continued driving for 6 blocks after emergency lights activated. Torres picked up his phone and called Providence Police Department. "I need the complete file on the Wellington traffic stop. Everything Officer Ramirez documented." The file arrived within an hour. Torres spread the contents across his desk, reading through Ramirez's incident report with growing interest. The officer had been meticulous, documenting every detail of the pursuit, the stop, Wellington's behavior. One section made Torres reach for a legal pad. Subject refused to lower window for approximately 2 minutes despite repeated requests. Subject remained on phone call during initial contact. When asked for license and registration, subject stated, "Do you know what this call is worth? Probably more than your yearly salary." Subject then threw license at officer rather than handing it directly. Subject refused to exit vehicle when requested for field sobriety assessment. Subject stated, "I'm not drunk, I'm busy. Write your ticket so I can leave." Torres highlighted another passage. Subject did not comply with lawful order to stop for 6 blocks, running 4 red lights and 2 stop signs during pursuit. When asked why he failed to stop, immediately subject stated, "I was looking for somewhere convenient." Subject showed no remorse for endangering pedestrians or creating pursuit situation. Obstruction of justice, failure to comply with lawful order, potential reckless endangerment charges beyond the traffic violations. The middle finger in court added criminal contempt already charged, but this went deeper. Torres pulled up Providence Journal archives. A reporter named Sarah Mitchell had been digging into Wellington's traffic history. Her article published that morning was devastating. Sources within Providence PD indicate Marcus Wellington has been stopped for speeding violations 7 times in the past 4 years. None resulted in citations. Officers interviewed anonymously described receiving pressure from supervisors to handle it quietly when the vehicle registered to Apex Capital appeared in traffic stops. One officer stated, "We knew who he was. We knew he had connections. We were told writing him up would create problems." The article continued with documented incidents. May 2021, stopped for going 50 in a 30 zone near Brown University. Warning only. September 2021, stopped for running a red light at Kennedy Plaza. No citation. March 2022, stopped for aggressive lane changes on I-95. Officer noted Wellington was on phone, refused to end call. Released with verbal warning. Torres made a note to subpoena those officers. If there was a pattern of special treatment, if Wellington's wealth and position had been purchasing informal immunity that changed the entire narrative. His phone rang. District Attorney Rebecca Chen. You're looking at the Wellington case. If The traffic stop raises questions beyond what Judge Caprio addressed. I'm getting calls from community groups. They want to know why a CEO who nearly killed people, who disrespected a police officer, who mocked the court system, is getting treated like this is just about speeding. They're asking how many times he got away with it before. Torres understood what she wasn't saying directly. This had become about systemic inequality, about whether wealth purchases different justice. I'll need a week to build the case properly. You have 3 days. The press conference is Friday. Be ready to announce charges or explain why we're not filing. That afternoon, Judge Caprio agreed to an interview with Providence's NBC affiliate. He rarely spoke to media about specific cases, but the national attention and misconceptions required clarification. The interview was conducted in his chambers, the judge seated behind his desk, American flag and Rhode Island state flag flanking him. The reporter Lisa Chen started directly. Judge Caprio, critics are saying your sentence was disproportionate, that you let personal offense at Mr. Wellington's gesture influence your judgment. How do you respond? Caprio's expression remained calm, measured. The sentence I imposed had nothing to do with personal offense and everything to do with public safety and accountability. Mr. Wellington demonstrated through his actions and his words that he does not believe traffic laws apply to him. That's not an attitude. That's a threat. But 6 months license suspension for a first offense. It wasn't a first offense in spirit, even if it was the first time he was held accountable. Caprio leaned forward slightly. This court received documentation showing Mr. Wellington has been stopped multiple times over the years for similar violations. Each time somehow he avoided citation. That pattern of escaping consequences created the mindset we saw in my courtroom. A man who genuinely believed his position placed him above the law, Lisa pressed. Some argue you're making an example of him because he's wealthy. I'm holding him to the same standard I'd hold anyone who drove 68 miles per hour through a residential neighborhood at school dismissal time, who nearly struck multiple pedestrians, who refused to stop for police, who showed zero remorse, and who then demonstrated contempt for the court. Caprio's voice remained steady but carried weight. If anything, his wealth and position make his actions more reprehensible, not less. He employs 600 people. Those families depend on his judgment. He makes decisions affecting millions of dollars. That level of responsibility requires higher standards, not lower ones. What about his middle finger gesture? That gesture revealed who he is when he doesn't get his way. It showed what he really thinks about authority, about rules, about anyone who tells him no. And that revelation is exactly why my sentence was necessary. A man with that mentality operating a 3-ton vehicle at triple the speed limit is a tragedy waiting to happen. Lisa shifted approach. The sentence affects his livelihood, his ability to work. Caprio's response was immediate. His reckless driving could have ended someone's life. Let me be very clear about what we're discussing. He pulled out the dash cam footage on his laptop, turning it toward the camera. This grandmother you see stumbling backward had to grab a light post to avoid falling into traffic. This 8-year-old boy on a bicycle swerved into grass, scraping his knee, choosing injury over death. Mr. Wellington's livelihood versus a child's life. That's not a difficult calculation. So this is about deterrence. This is about ensuring he never does it again and sending a clear message that Rhode Island will not tolerate wealth-based immunity. Every parent who puts their child on a school bus, every person who crosses a street, every senior citizen walking to the grocery store deserves to know that traffic laws will be enforced equally, regardless of who's behind the wheel. Marcus Wellington held his own press conference the next day, flanked by 2 attorneys from one of Boston's most expensive firms. He'd been fired from Apex, but he still had resources, connections, and a pathological inability to accept responsibility. I'm here today to address a grave injustice. Wellington began, his voice steady but laced with barely controlled fury. What happened in that courtroom wasn't about traffic safety. It was about a judge who saw an opportunity to grandstand, to punish success, to make himself feel powerful by destroying someone who's achieved more than he ever will. The attorneys flanking him looked uncomfortable, but stayed silent. Judge Caprio couldn't handle being told the truth. He couldn't handle someone not cowering before his little gavel. So he manufactured outrage, weaponized the legal system, and turned a minor traffic matter into a witch hunt, a reporter called out. You gave him the middle finger on camera. I expressed frustration at a system that values performative authority over common sense. I was prosecuted for a gesture, for an attitude, because Judge Caprio's ego couldn't tolerate being challenged by someone successful. Another reporter. You were going 68 in a 25 zone. You nearly hit pedestrians. Alleged near misses exaggerated by a police report designed to justify an excessive stop. I'm an experienced driver. I had complete control. This entire prosecution is driven by envy, by resentment of people who've built something, who've created jobs, who contribute to society, instead of sitting in judgment of others. His lead attorney, Gerald Hoffman, stepped to the microphone. We're filing a motion to vacate the sentence on grounds of judicial bias and disproportionate punishment. We're also exploring civil remedies for the reputational damage caused by Judge Caprio's vindictive actions. Back in his chambers watching the press conference, Judge Caprio made one phone call to the district attorney's office. Whatever you're considering filing, do it. He just proved everything I said about his character. Ada Torres smiled on the other end. Press conference is Friday, Judge. We'll be ready. The final hearing came 1 week after the board's decision. Marcus Wellington entered Judge Caprio's courtroom for the last time, but everything had changed. No expensive suit, just business casual. No smirk, just exhaustion carved into his face. No entourage, just a single attorney who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. The gallery was packed. News cameras lined the back wall. This wasn't traffic court anymore. This was the conclusion of a morality play that had gripped the nation. Caprio reviewed the final documents without looking up. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, and somehow that made it more devastating. Mr. Wellington, the district attorney, has declined to file additional charges related to obstruction, accepting that the sentence already imposed serves the interests of justice. Your former employer has submitted documentation of your termination and their new ethics protocols. The Providence Police Department has forwarded your case to their Internal Affairs Division for review of past incidents. And the State Business Licensing Board has opened an inquiry into your professional conduct. Marcus stood motionless, his attorney's hand on his shoulder, the only thing keeping him upright. You came into this courtroom believing wealth made you untouchable. You left this courtroom learning that some things cannot be purchased. Not immunity, not respect, not your position, not your reputation. Caprio paused, the silence crushing. The law exists to prove one fundamental truth: nobody is above it. Not because of their bank account, not because of their title, not because of who they employ or how much they contribute. The law protects everyone equally, or it protects no one at all. Marcus opened his mouth, perhaps to argue, perhaps to apologize, but no words came. For the first time since entering Caprio's courtroom, he had nothing to say. The man who'd mocked the judge, who'd flipped him off, who'd declared laws were for lesser people, stood silent because the truth had finally broken through his armor. Your sentence stands: 6 months suspension, 50 hours community service, 8 weeks safety training, $5,500 in fines. Court adjourned. The gavel fell. Final. Absolute. Marcus turned and walked out, not with the arrogance he'd entered with, but with the defeated shuffle of someone who'd discovered that the rules he'd spent a lifetime ignoring had teeth after all. 2 days later, Janet Morrison stood before Apex Capital's entire staff in the main auditorium. 600 employees, their futures uncertain, their trust shattered. What happened with Marcus Wellington was not an isolated incident. It was a failure of culture, of oversight, of values we claimed but didn't enforce. Her voice echoed in the silent room. We allowed success to excuse behavior that endangered people. We rewarded results without examining methods. We built a company where compliance was treated as obstacle rather than foundation. She outlined the new protocols. Mandatory ethics training for all leadership. Anonymous reporting channels for regulatory concerns. External audits of past decisions. The Wellington Accountability Program, named deliberately to ensure the lesson stayed visible. Some of you are angry. You should be. You're paying the price for leadership failures you didn't commit. Clients are nervous. Contracts are under review. Your stock options lost value. That's not fair, and I won't pretend otherwise. An engineer in the third row raised his hand. Are our jobs safe? I can't guarantee anything in this environment, but I can promise that we're rebuilding this company on a foundation that won't collapse the next time someone in power decides rules don't apply to them. Across town, Judge Caprio sat in his chambers, reading letters that had poured in by the thousands. Teachers thanking him for showing their students that actions have consequences. Parents grateful someone finally held a reckless driver accountable. Accident victims who'd watched wealthy offenders walk free finding hope in his verdict. One letter came from Daniel Martinez's mother, the 8-year-old boy who'd crashed his bike, avoiding Wellington's Bentley. My son is riding again, slowly, carefully, but riding. You gave us justice when we thought justice was only for people who could afford it. Thank you for proving we matter too. Caprio set the letter down, his eyes wet. This was why he'd taken the bench 30 years ago. Not for the power, not for the authority, but for moments when the system actually worked, when accountability applied equally, when a child could ride his bike without nightmare, because someone with a gavel had said enough. He picked up his pen and wrote a response, just 2 sentences. Daniel matters. Every child crossing every street in this city matters. That's not justice, that's civilization. The case of Marcus Wellington closed officially that afternoon. The legal proceedings finished. But the conversation it sparked continued in classrooms, boardrooms, dinner tables across America. About privilege, about accountability, about what kind of society we choose to build, and in Providence, Rhode Island, on residential streets where children played and grandmothers crossed intersections, drivers slowed down a little more, paid attention a little closer, because they'd seen what happened when someone thought the rules didn't apply. Judge Caprio had sent a message that echoed far beyond his courtroom. Power isn't wrong, but using power to endanger others is unforgivable. Wealth isn't a crime, but believing wealth purchases exemption from consequences destroys the social contract. Success should be celebrated, but success without responsibility is just socially acceptable sociopathy. Marcus Wellington had walked into that courtroom thinking his money made him special. He walked out learning that every human being is special, and that's exactly why the law must protect all of them equally. The middle finger he'd raised became a symbol not of his defiance, but of the moment privilege met its match and lost. What unfolded in Judge Caprio's courtroom proved that accountability still exists, that wealth doesn't erase consequences, that rules apply equally when integrity holds the gavel. Marcus Wellington believed success made him exempt. He learned that character matters more than credentials, that respect cannot be purchased, that the moment you think you're above the law is when you're most vulnerable to it. Ask yourself, where are you acting like Wellington? Where have you decided rules are for others? What changes if you treat everyone's safety and dignity as equal to your own? This video is created for educational and inspirational purposes under fair use, not to defame or attack any individual. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. It means the world. If this story moved you, please like, subscribe, and share so more voices can join this journey. Until next time, stay strong, stay awake, and I'll see you in the next video.